Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Learn at Home webinar series from the University of Rhode Island College of the Environment and Life Sciences and Cooperative Extension. My name is Vanessa Venturini, and I am the State Program Leader for the URI Master Gardener Program, and we are helping put on some of these wonderful educational talks. Today's is about what is the spotted lanternfly, and we're going to hear from Alana Russell, who is a research assistant with the URI Biocontrol Lab. So if you haven't heard of what the Biocontrol Lab is, basically this is our unit on campus that conducts research to help control our local invasive species. That's kind of the short-term answer to that. You want to go right ahead, and I'll do a little bit more of a bio in a moment. I will mention that Alana has worked on controlling swallow-wort, lily leaf beetle, and phragmites. She has a bachelor's degree in natural resources from UConn and a master's degree in entomology from LSU. And she is a native Rhode Islander, so she came back here and now works at the university. Let's go right ahead. Awesome. So this talk is brought to you by the University of Rhode Island Cooperative Extension. You may know that URI is our land-grant university in Rhode Island. And so land-grant universities make sure that we bring the research that's generated at our universities out to those who need it to improve lives and the environment. And we have different areas of focus with the Cooperative Extension in land stewardship, food systems and agriculture, water, energy efficiency, and healthy lifestyles. You can go right ahead, Alana. We are committed to not only helping people improve their quality of life, livelihood, and health of our environment, but we also believe in social justice, and collectively we strive to deepen our cultural understanding and proficiency while building capacity to create inclusive experiences and address diverse stakeholder needs. We're really happy to bring you these webinars while we're unable to meet in person. This is a great way of getting good science-based information out to those who are interested. And just a few items of housekeeping. I would really appreciate, we would all appreciate if you could complete our brief survey that's going to be sent to you in an email after this talk. We read all of them, and it helps us assess how we're doing and if we're having an impact with these talks. So thanks for completing that survey. Also, if you would like to watch a recording of this or any of our other webinars, you can visit our URI Cooperative Extension YouTube channel, and that's easily accessed just by searching that term in the search box, and they are all closed captioned once they're uploaded. Okay, it is my pleasure to welcome Alana Russell. Thank you, Alana.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa. Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. And thanks everybody for tuning in. This is very exciting. I'm going to answer that daunting question today. What is the spotted lanternfly? So we'll go through what you need to know to prepare and respond to this exotic pest. Okay. So this is part of our Forest and Agricultural Pest Outreach Program. This is a program that is in collaboration with DEM Agriculture. So that's Cindy Kwolek. She's the Cooperative Agricultural Pest Coordinator for Rhode Island, and URI Biocontrol. So that's myself and a little bit of my supervisor, Lisa Tewksbury. We are funded by the Plant Protection Act, that's formerly known as the Farm Bill. And what we're doing here is essentially trying to elicit some early detection through outreach of some of these potential exotic insects that are coming into North America, New England, and such. Essentially, we want to have boots on the ground awareness. So that's you guys out there as our infantry with your eyes looking for these insects. A lot of these pests are easier to identify. They're more conspicuous than like a mottled brown moth that you need a pheromone lure to attract. And a lot of like the signs of damage or feeding are a lot easier to identify. So these are really, really good target pests to do these types of programs with. So what we do for this one is we provide outreach presentations, development and distribution of educational materials. We organize public visual surveys. And we provide online resources. And so for this program this year, we are trying to inform the public about 3 species. That's emerald ash borer, Asian longhorn beetle, and spotted lanternfly. Today, I'm going to focus solely on spotted lanternfly. So to give you a little bit of a background, spotted lanternfly is, the scientific name is Lycorma delicatula. It's also sometimes referred to as just SLF. So if you hear me saying that, you know what I mean. It's an invasive plant hopper, which is native to China, India, and Vietnam. Unfortunately, it was first discovered in the US in September 2014, and that was in Berks County, Pennsylvania. Since then, it has subsequently spread to several states. That includes New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, and West Virginia. Additionally, there have been what's called interceptions in New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. So an interception is essentially when an individual find of spotted lanternfly was reported, but when they went back to look for more spotted lanternfly, they couldn't find further infestation. So there's likely not a reproducing population there. This still sort of attests to how spotted lanternfly can spread very easily to many states. We'll go through this distribution map in just a minute, but you can see that Rhode Island has not had any interceptions or infestations of spotted lanternfly. But if any of you are tuning in from a different state, you can see that Massachusetts and Connecticut have had some interceptions, as well as New York. Okay, so immediately after that first detection in 2014, Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture began conducting delimiting surveys in surrounding areas. So they were just trying to look what is the extent of that infestation. They also tracked shipments leaving Berks County, that first where it was first found, and no additional finds were found spreading through to other areas. That resulted in an award of $5.5 million in Farm Bill funding for Pennsylvania to put towards further surveying, monitoring, research, and outreach. This is a kind of interesting GIF here. It shows, this is the spotted lanternfly quarantine area. Up in the top corner here, you can see the year as it passes by. And essentially, you can see that it started out in 2014, right here. Only initial parts of Berks and Montgomery County, very centralized. In subsequent years, 2016, 17, it moved on to other neighboring counties in Pennsylvania. And then by 2018, it was spreading to several counties in Pennsylvania as well as into other states. So it was moving very, very fast, despite quarantines in place. This is the same map that you saw earlier. The current impacted locations include those states that I mentioned earlier. So those states that have infestations, the counties are indicated in this light blue. The small purple circles indicate those individual finds, so those interceptions where one was reported, but any follow-up did not find any major infestation. And additionally, this red border here is sort of delimiting where each state has an internal quarantine. So where they're trying to keep the population of spotted lanternfly contained to that area and have strict regulations and inspections in terms of moving items in and out of those areas. So the continued response after 2014 for spotted lanternfly, there's no current federal quarantine available. So the USDA has not applied a widespread federal quarantine for spotted lanternfly. They've really left it up to the states. So each state, or some of the states, such as Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Virginia, have imposed internal quarantines for any materials leaving that area. So that means that these counties have to go through strict inspections and prove that they have, to the best of their ability, ensured that there's no spotted lanternfly in their shipments in order to leave. So that does include not only agricultural commodities that are being shipped out, but also moving materials, pallet wood, et cetera. We'll go into why that is in a little bit, but it's a pretty daunting task. Additionally, New York State, like I said, has not found an infestation, but they have had several interceptions. So New York has imposed external quarantines onto infested counties in Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, Virginia, and West Virginia. So essentially, they're acting as a border, really trying to prevent any movement of infested material into their state. So they're being very, very active about that. And there are repercussions towards these quarantine states if they do not comply with New York. Additionally, Pennsylvania has a permitting system provided, so that's provided by Penn State for businesses that are shipping from quarantine counties. So this entails a training that the businesses go through from Penn State. They get their little permit, and it shows that they are compliant. They're educated about spotted lanternfly. They know how to identify it. And essentially when these businesses, when the trucks or other vehicles are moving through the corridors and at inspection stations, they can provide the permit to prove that they are complying. It's also a little bit of a marketing tool for these businesses because since spotted lanternfly is such a big issue in Pennsylvania, it's a good way for them to say, we are compliant, we care, we are trying our best not to spread this terrible invasive. And so it's a nice thing to be able to put on your website to advertise. So what's the concern for spotted lanternfly in Rhode Island? Well, it is spreading quickly despite those quarantines and some control measures that have been in place by the impacted states. Populations multiply quickly in those infestation areas, as we saw from that GIF as it expanded. And so for Rhode Island, there have been 3 finds in neighboring states within the past year. So that was 1 in Massachusetts in the Boston area, and 2 in Connecticut, 1 New Haven County and 1 Hartford County. So it's moving towards New England. Its body maybe going to show up in Connecticut and Massachusetts first, and we're thinking it's probably right after going to show up into Rhode Island. In Rhode Island, we have high populations of one of the preferred host tree of heaven. I'll go into a little bit more detail about that in a bit. And we're very concerned about the economic impacts that spotted lanternfly could have on our local vineyards and orchards. We have our fruit commodities are one of our major agricultural commodities in Rhode Island, and we're worried about what spotted lanternfly could do if it gets into the state towards those industries. On to my favorite part. I'm an entomologist, so I enjoy talking about the biology and life cycle of spotted lanternfly. Spotted lanternfly is not a moth as it may appear, nor is it a fly as the name suggests. Spotted lanternfly is a plant hopper, actually, and that's in the family Fulgoridae, if you're interested. So pictured here on the right, you can see sort of this beak-looking mouth part that's called a piercing, sucking mouth part. And essentially what the lanternflies do is they take that piercing, sucking mouth part, you can see from this lower photo, they stick it in from the outside of the stem through the bark or tissue of their host plant, and then they're able to then suck out the sap or the phloem from their hosts. So similarly to aphids, lanternflies excrete a lot of honeydew while they're feeding. They're sucking in a lot of fluids, so they're bypassing their digestive system and excreting a lot of the sugar from their back ends. So that also has implications in towards why spotted lanternfly is a nuisance, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well in a bit. In terms of the life cycle, spotted lanternfly has 3 life stages. So that's the egg stage, the nymph stage, and the adult stage. And they only have 1 generation per year. So what that means is you're only going to be seeing the eggs at one time of year, you're only going to be seeing the nymphs at one time of year, and you're only going to be seeing the adults at one time of year. Fortunately for us, spotted lanternfly is very easy to identify once you know what you're looking for. The adults are about 1 inch in length. The forewing is sort of reddish brown with black spots, and then towards the proximal end, there's sort of some speckling there. They do have this very distinct scarlet hind wing. That is very helpful to identify. However, you don't always see that when it has its wings at rest. This picture here is a lanternfly that's caught a lot easier. This upper photo is actually more what you might encounter in the field, where there's spotted lanternflies resting on the bark of a tree, and you mostly just see that reddish brown forewing and then maybe a little peak of. Understand what lanternflies look like with their wings at rest and expanded, and just understand that you might not always see that bright red. The females lay egg masses in groups of about 30 to even 80. So here's a freshly laid egg mass pictured here on the left. The female then, after she lays that mass, she covers it in this gray-brown clay-like substance that's a protective substance. But you'll notice in the bottom left corner that they don't always cover all of it. So these are also lanternfly eggs, and you can see each individual one is laid in a line like that. Over time, the egg masses will sort of get weathered and crack and dry out. So here is that same egg mass laid just a few months after it's been laid. You can see it's cracking now, that protective covering, but they are the same egg mass. And those egg masses are also about 1 inch in length. This right photo is several lanternfly egg masses on a birch tree. So what the current thinking is that a female but if you can imagine, if she's laying 2 egg masses and they have up to 80 eggs in each mass, and there's thousands of lanternflies in an infested zone, you can imagine that that's a lot of lanternfly eggs and potential nymphs that hatch out. So the nymphs, when they're early instar, so instar just means developmental stage, they are smaller and black with white spots. So the 1st through 3rd instars, 1/8 of an inch to about 1/4 of an inch in length. It isn't until the 4th instar that they start to turn this distinct red color and have black and white markings as well. So in that 4th instar is when they're about 1/2 inch in length. So the nymphs are also pretty distinct looking. In terms of timing of when you're going to see the lanternflies, the egg stage is the overwintering stage. So this is a timeline of what you might see in Pennsylvania. It could be a little bit different depending on what state you're in, but essentially the eggs overwintered, so they'll be seen on their trees and other surfaces around November through April. It is also interesting to note that the egg masses look a bit like gypsy moth egg masses. Gypsy moth egg masses are a bit smaller. The color is a little orangier and they're fuzzy. But if you have your eye trained for looking for gypsy moth egg masses and you see something similar but slightly different, it might be good to think, well, maybe this is a lanternfly egg mass. So the first instar nymphs hatch out in May, and then they develop through the other instars throughout June and July. So right now we're, in the middle of June in instar nymphs out and about feeding and potentially could be spread. It isn't until about late July usually that the 4th instars that are red are found, and then shortly after that they will molt into adulthood. Interestingly, after they molt into adulthood, they have this really long, they have this really long period here where they are feeding heavily, they're aggregating like in this picture here, and they're flying around quickly from tree to tree. So I think those females are feeding a lot. They're trying to find the most suitable host so they can start producing those eggs. But this is a very long period where they're just feeding, flying, and aggregating, but they're not mating yet. It isn't until late September that scientists have seen the mating in the field. And then right after that, right after they mate, is when they start laying their eggs in about October. Around that time, after the eggs are laid, the adults will die off after the first hard freeze that they have. But those eggs are the cold hardy stage that will survive the winter. So what is at risk for spotted lanternfly? Unfortunately, lanternflies have a very broad host range. They've been known to feed on over 65 different plant species. So that's both trunk, the branches, and the stems of their host plant. Some of those species that are of concern for us in Rhode Island include grapevines, fruit trees, hops, several hardwood trees, and ornamentals. The young nymphs have also been found on garden plants, even basil, cucumber. Some of those ornamentals may be tree ornamentals, but also even something like rose. So they do have a fairly broad host range. However, even though that's broad, there has been research showing that the lanternflies show a strong preference for a much shorter list of species. Some of those could be tree of heaven black walnut, and grapes. So that might help us in terms of targeting searches or management if we know that there's a preference out there for a particular species. And furthermore, current research has showed that there's also a shorter list that the lanternfly can complete development. So that's from early instar nymph all the way through to adult without dying. That list includes tree of heaven, chinaberry, hops, black walnut, butternut, oriental bittersweet. So some of these trees like tree of heaven and bittersweet, or a shrub, are invasive, so that might also help us with our management techniques that I'll discuss in a little bit. It is important to understand the seasonal host phenology of spotted lanternfly. So basically that means what host will spotted lanternfly be found on at what time of year, and it changes. For example, earlier in the season, May and June, the lanternflies may be found on an early season host like rose. Later, as they're developing, they might move on to something like black walnut. And then much later in the growing season, you may find them on a later season tree, such as our maples. Essentially, what this means is start to senesce or go dormant. They're less likely to be a host for spotted lanternfly. And the rationale behind that is that little piercing, sucking mouth part that the lanternflies have, they're actually not very good at sucking with that. They really rely on the vascular system of the plant to sort of shoot the sap into their bodies. So you can imagine if a plant is going dormant, it's not moving around the water and the sap in their tissue as actively, and so therefore it's not as suitable of a host for lanternfly. But basically why this is important is because when you're going out on your property and you're looking for lanternfly, you may not see them. For example, if it's May, you may not see them on your maples, or you may not think you have them there. If you go back in October, you could have lanternflies flying in and attacking your maples. So it's kind of important to understand what plants to look at which time of year. Just want to stop and show an interesting video. This is taken by my supervisor, Lisa Tewksbury, in Pennsylvania a couple years ago. These are the nymphs crawling around. You can see that they're very quick, jumpy, quick little scurry guys. And here is an aggregation of the nymphs on some bittersweet here. So they do start aggregating later in their life. Additionally, here's a video of some adults in some apple trees. You can tell in this orchard, this is pretty close to harvest time, but just tons and tons of lanternflies flying around in front of your. Imagine that this has implications towards if this was a pick your own operation. This might not be very attractive to customers coming in with lanternflies flying around and bothering them. So what's the concern of spotted lanternfly coming up to Rhode Island or some of these other states that it hasn't infested yet? It's pretty high. Unfortunately, the egg masses are quite inconspicuous. This picture here, there's 2 egg masses, but you can see that it's really hard to tell with the contrast of the bark color there. Additionally, the egg masses can be found on not only the tree trunks and branches, but also stone and other smooth man-made surfaces. So it's not just trees that they're laying on, which means, you know, if this is, for example, a vehicle or pallet wood, here is a lanternfly egg mass on some pallet wood that looks just like a burl. You can imagine a lot of these types of objects are highly mobile. We use pallet wood for shipping. We're driving our vehicles across state in just a day. Because of that, if you're not checking. Additionally, from that video you just watched, the adults can fly. At times they're swarming on that in that August and September timeframe. They're swarming. They're moving quickly from tree to tree, finding suitable hosts, the ones that are, you know, have good vascular systems, movement of nutrients in their trunks. And additionally, you saw from that first video that the nymphs are very quick and jumpy. I actually went down to Pennsylvania last summer and walked into a patch that had a lanternfly infestation, and the nymphs dropped down on my clothes. And before I left, and before I got in my vehicle, I had to check my clothes as if it were like a tick check to make sure that I didn't have any on me. and that I wasn't transporting them because later that afternoon I was actually going to a different state. So you can see how that's, I saw how easy that was just to get one in your car and transport it like that. The moral of the story here is that spotted lanternfly is a great hitchhiker. Essentially, thorough checks before moving items inside or outside the quarantine area is critical to not moving this insect. So what is it actually doing? The impact on plants, the general consensus is that heavy feeding can contribute to tree mortality. This feeding evidence can be seen as oozing sap. So here is a oozing tree of heaven. Wilting, leaf curling, tree dieback in the canopy as well could be signs of lanternfly feeding. Here is a black walnut branch that I found in Pennsylvania last summer. On the lower part is a aggregation of lanternflies, and you can see this yellowing and flagging of the branches in general, wilting and dieback as a result of their feeding. Additionally, sooty mold can build up on that honeydew that they're excreting. So here's a grape leaf that has sooty mold built up on it. And unfortunately, that can block the photosynthesis of either the understory plants, or if it's a leaf next to where they're feeding, which may cause mortality. So that's sort of a secondary mortality factor that isn't directly due to lanternfly feeding, but still can kill the plants. How has lanternfly impacted the public? Well, like we saw in those videos, the swarms of adults can move quickly from tree to tree. It's often very hard to target for a homeowner for treatment because they may have a lanternfly aggregation in their backyard one day, and when they go back the next day, it's gone. Maybe it's in their neighbor's yard at that point. That honeydew that can rain down while they're feeding heavily excretions can build up and attract nuisance insects. So spotted lanternflies will not bite humans, but that honeydew, sticky honeydew, can attract wasps and ants and other things that can be harmful to humans. The sooty mold can build up on outdoor surfaces. Here's a hosta in somebody's garden that is obviously going to die from that sooty mold accumulation. And also here's somebody's back porch steps or something that obviously looks like kind of slippery to me. It sounds like it could be very dangerous if that's not cleaned off. And just in general for the public, it's been very time consuming to check vehicles and outdoor equipment just to make sure that they're not contributing to the spread. And this is an added inconvenience that they didn't have to account for before. How has spotted lanternfly impacted our growers? This is really where we're seeing the biggest economic impact. It's a little too soon to see where spotted lanternfly is doing the most damage. It's feeding on a lot of trees, but we haven't necessarily seen that it's on a forest level killing off, the whole diversity of species. Where we are seeing an impact ecologically and economically is in the vineyards. Grape growers in Pennsylvania are seeing yield reductions of 80 to 90%. So that's from current year feeding where they already had an established population. So essentially, what this means is that heavy feeding can result in directly the death of vines, or it can weaken them so that they don't have the hardiness to survive the winter, and that's sort of a secondary mortality factor. But this picture on the upper right is from Beekman Orchards, where you can see that all of these grapevines are just completely dead, and this was due to spotted lanternfly. So lanternflies coming into the vineyards has resulted in a threefold increase in the frequency of insecticide applications. So that's increased the cost from $54 an acre in 2016 to about $147 an acre in 2018. So that's increased cost from the product, that's increased cost due to labor as well. And you can imagine that that's not very ecologically sound to have to continually reapply. Even if these insecticides are effective and knock back a lot of lanternflies, the pressure of more lanternflies coming in is just so severe that they can't keep up, especially during harvest time, which is when the adults are coming in. So additionally, in the orchards, we saw that video, the swarms of adults at pick your own operations are causing a nuisance, definitely hurting business. And those farmers are having to spray again a lot as well. And also one industry that we might not have realized that's being impacted is Christmas tree growers. So lanternflies are not generally known to feed on conifers. However, they will lay those egg masses on the branches or trunk of Christmas trees. So the egg masses are hard to detect for the Christmas tree growers, and that could contribute to the spread. It's also costly if they are treating their trees for that, and labor intensive to try to look for them to ensure that they're not moving the trees around. And again, they're moving the trees around during the time of year that the egg masses are alive and are overwintering and could get spread that way. So I'm going to talk broadly a little bit about the available management methods. It obviously varies state by state. Of course, it matters if you have spotted lanternfly in your state or if you don't have spotted lanternfly in your state. But I'll give you a broad overview, and then I'll give you a few resources where you can go further if you want to investigate what's appropriate for your location. So there are some cultural and mechanical management methods available. Those include egg scraping, tree banding, and the removal of one of those preferred hosts, tree of heaven. Additionally, Penn State has done a lot of research and recommendations for their state in terms of chemical management. So insecticides, they have egg, nymph, and adult targeted insecticides for spotted lanternfly. And again, that varies. Is that in a vineyard? Are you a homeowner, or are you a landscape professional? And then there's also some biocontrol prospects that are being researched currently. Again, this is more of a long-term, longer process, but it's for long-term management. So there's 2 parasitoid and 2 fungal pathogen species that are currently being studied. And I'll go into details about a little bit more of these, each of these methods now. So egg scraping is something that can be done by anyone. So you could use a credit card or a similar tool, like a little stick here, to scrape the egg mass from the surface that it's been laid on. And again, that could be a tree or an inanimate object. You want to deposit all those eggs and the associated debris into a container with an alcohol solution like rubbing alcohol or hand sanitizer. And this should be done between October and July, essentially when the egg masses are out there and they're viable during the winter. A few things to note, make sure that you check for uncovered eggs. So we talked about that a little bit earlier. Here's the covered part of this egg mass, and here's that uncovered part of the egg mass. It's important to make sure that you're scraping both the covered part. This uncovered part still has eggs that could hatch out, so make sure that you're scraping off all of that and the associated debris into your alcohol solution. So it can be somewhat effective if done in teams. You can imagine that there are a lot of egg masses out there, and it's very labor intensive to do this. Generally, in terms of effectiveness, what they're saying is this may help reduce nymph populations in the springtime, but you may still be at risk of adults reinfesting later in the season because they are that winged mobile life stage that are coming in trying to find the desirable hosts for that time of year. Additionally, oftentimes it's easy, we're really only able to scrape those egg masses where we can see along the base of the tree, but the egg masses could be laid in tree canopies as well. So unless we have a bucket truck, that's kind of hard to really get the whole tree. I still think this is a great management method for homeowner, especially if you have a small scale location, you want to try to reduce the local numbers of your population. This is something that you can do, and you don't need a pesticide license or anything like that to do it. Next, tree banding. You might be familiar because we've done this for some of our other insect pests like our gypsy moths. Essentially what you do here is you wrap a tree trunk with a sticky band like these women are doing here. You want to do that approximately 4 feet up the tree. And this is used to catch young nymphs as they're crawling up the trunk of the tree, trying to get to the newer shoots or branches up in the tree. And when they crawl past, if they're young, they're not able to pass by that sticky band and they get stuck in it. You do want to make sure that the bands are on a smooth surface, like a tree with smooth bark. For example, black walnut has very rough bark. You can imagine that those ridges might make it so that the young nymphs could pass under that sticky band. A few other things to note, you want to place that band in early May before the nymphs begin to hatch out, so just right before they're about to hatch out. Unfortunately, bycatch is a potential when using sticky bands. There have been a few reports of small birds getting stuck to these sticky bands. So a few ways to get around that could be putting a cage around the band. So here is some chicken wire around that band that at least prevents larger animals from getting through. Also, you could use inward-facing sticky bands, so they kind of face the inside of the tree, so that really makes sure that only things that are crawling up the tree get stuck in them. And then kind of like egg scraping, this may reduce the numbers of lanternflies locally, but over a large area may not be as effective. But I think if you're a homeowner, this may be a good recommendation for you if you have spotted lanternfly in your area. So this is sort of a cultural control with chemicals, managing Ailanthus or tree of heaven. So the rationale here would be if tree of heaven is one of the preferred hosts of spotted lanternfly, if you cut back the abundance of it on your property, you may be cutting back the number of trees that are attractive to bring spotted lanternfly into your property. So tree of heaven is pictured here on the right. There are a lot of resources out there to help you identify tree of heaven from other lookalikes. We have a lot of tree of heaven on our roadsides and disturbed areas in Rhode Island. But you can generally manage for Ailanthus year-round. You can do this with a foliar spray with an herbicide. You can also do a stump spray following mechanical removal, so you can cut it down first and then spray the stump. You can also do what's called hack and squirt. So you make a cut in the bark using an axe, and then you apply herbicide into the cut. Lastly, you could do a basal bark spray if the trees are young. Essentially, unfortunately, you really cannot remove tree of heaven without using herbicides. If you try to cut it down, it will cause more shoots to come up and actually encourage growth. So you have to use herbicides. This Penn State Extension website is really great. It gives you a lot of details on how to identify tree of heaven from the lookalikes and also how to control it with the herbicides. So make sure you understand how to do that. Make sure you are licensed or able to apply in your state what they're recommending, or contact an arborist or landscape professional to do this for you. Similar to removing Ailanthus is using Ailanthus or tree of heaven as a trap tree. I like this method a little bit better. So essentially what this method does is you want to kill most of the Ailanthus in a given area. So in your property, again, you're using herbicides. You'll kill most of them, but keep a few male trees that aren't flowering or seeding. Keep a few remaining on your property. Those remaining trees you will inject or apply a systemic insecticide on. And then essentially if spotted lanternflies in the area, and they're going to come in and target those remaining Ailanthus trees. While they're feeding on it, they're going to end up ingesting the systemic insecticide. And since tree of heaven is not a native tree to North America, there probably aren't a lot of native insects that are feeding on it as well. So, and if you're not using a female tree, there won't be any pollinators that are visiting the flowers. So this can be done mid-May through August when spotted lanternflies are feeding on Ailanthus. I like this method because if you have a property that has other desirable hosts other than Ailanthus, you may want to use this. For example, if you cut down all the Ailanthus at your house and you have grapes, they may be just as attracted to grapes and may go to that because they don't have any other Ailanthus to go to. But if you have a few Ailanthus trap trees, they may be attracted to those trap trees first and then die when they ingest the insecticide, and you may be saving them from moving on, or saving your grapes from the spotted lanternfly. So there are definitely a variety of chemical management techniques available for spotted lanternfly. Penn State has done a lot of research for their state and for their specific uses on chemical management. In general, there are contact insecticides available. So contact insecticides kill insects on contact. So that's both during application and as a result of contact with residue following application of the insecticide. There's also systemic. So systemic insecticides are absorbed by the plant, and then when the lanternfly consumes the insecticide during feeding, they die. Systemic insecticides can be applied via injection, spraying, or basal drench. Just a little plug about insecticides in Rhode Island. The product must be registered for use in Rhode Island. It must be labeled for the intended use. So the product would not be labeled for spotted lanternfly, but it may be labeled for insects on a maple. So if you have spotted lanternfly on a maple, you can use that product on that tree. Be aware that some products and application methods may not be suitable for edible plants, so be conscientious of what you're spraying, at what time of year, etc. And on to what. The applicator must be licensed and certified if applying on a property that's not owned by them. And in general, the insecticides research is showing that it can be more effective than the mechanical methods, but it is definitely also more costly for the product, for the labor, and repeated applications, which are needed sometimes in the infestation zones, are just very, very ecologically unsustainable, and it's really hard to keep up with the reinfestation of spotted lanternfly. If you're in another state that's not Rhode Island, I suggest that you check your local government's environmental management websites for pesticide regulations and recommendations where you are. And again, that varies if you have spotted lanternfly in your state, if you don't, and where to go from there. Lastly, in terms of biocontrol prospects, so there are 2 parasitoid species. So those are small wasps that attack spotted lanternfly. They're currently in the research phase. So the first one is Anastatus orientalis. That's a parasitoid that attacks the eggs of spotted lanternfly. The second one is Dryaenus cynicus, and that species attacks the nymphs of spotted lanternfly. So this top photo is the Dryaenus wasp, and this middle one is actually a developing sac that contains the Dryaenus wasp. So the Dryaenus wasp lays their egg just by the wing pad of the spotted lanternfly nymph, and the wasp develops within this sac, feeding on the spotted lanternfly. And eventually, as the lanternfly gets to be 3rd or 4th instar, that's when the wasp kills the lanternfly and emerges as an adult. I'm really excited. URI is participating in a 4-year special commodities grant with Penn State and other regional institutions investigating the potential for spotted lanternfly biocontrol. So we're really excited to contribute to that research. This is obviously research that takes a lot of years. It's a rigorous process, but we're hoping for some promising results there. So there is additional research being conducted on 2 naturally occurring fungal pathogens. That's Bacoa major and Bovaria bassiana. So these were fungal pathogens that were found naturally native occurring in Pennsylvania and were found to be killing spotted lanternfly. Here is some Bovaria that has attacked spotted lanternfly on that bottom photo. So Penn State and Cornell are teaming up to test a EPA-approved biopesticide spray containing Bovaria bassiana to see its effectiveness, looking at specific products, spray rates, spray techniques, etc. So I'm hoping for some promise there. That could be a little bit closer down the pipeline to getting approved than other classical biocontrol currently. So that was a really broad overview of the techniques that are available, that mostly for Pennsylvania. I want to give a plug to the Penn State Spotted Lanternfly Management Guide page, or their management page. Here's the URL here. So I'll go a little slow so you can copy that down if you want. Here's what the top of the page looks like. They have tons and tons of resources targeted for homeowners and agricultural professionals and industry professionals. One thing that I really, really like, which is on this page, is their management guides, which are directed. They have one for homeowners, one for landscape professionals, grape growers, and also Christmas tree growers. So each management guide gives a little bit more specific information about how spotted lanternfly impacts those groups of people or those industries, what are the suggested management techniques for those specific groups, and it's just a little bit more targeted. So I would suggest going, if you have more detailed questions and you're in one of these groups, going to this website to read the management guides. They're really great. They have timing, details, and many, many more things. I also mentioned the Tree of Heaven identification and control given by Penn State. They have a lot of resources on that. That's very helpful. And also they give research updates on this page. So they're constantly researching best management practices, how to improve their techniques, are there new products in the pipeline, new recommendations. So tuning into this page is helpful periodically to see what's coming down the pipeline from Penn State. If you're in Rhode Island, you're wondering what to do, you think you found a spotted lanternfly, or how to prepare for spotted lanternfly, we're suggesting that you learn how to identify all the life stages. So that's both what they look like and what time of year you're going to find them. If you suspect that you found a spotted lanternfly, we ask that you take a photo and try to collect a specimen. The best thing is to get a specimen to us so we can really look at the characters and try to identify it. But luckily, a lot of us have smartphones. You can snap a photo too if you see something. So if you have that photo and or specimen, we ask that you go to this DEM report site. So go to dem.ri.gov/pestalert. Here's the page that it would look like here on the left. If you click this bottom button here, report an exotic pest, that will bring you to a portal to report that find. It will give you information to identify yourself, your location, and upload a photo and such. Or you can email myself or Cindy Kwolek. So Cindy is, again, the Cooperative Agricultural Pest Survey Coordinator for Rhode Island. On my last slide, I have our email addresses that we'll keep up, so you can jot them down if you want. By all means, send us a photo, ask us a question. Would be happy to answer that. In general, though, how to prepare, just keep yourself updated. If you want to read more information, visit our URI Biocontrol website, our page for spotted lanternfly. We have a lot of information on identification, distribution, management, a lot of links, some that I've talked about here, some that I haven't talked about. I think it's a great resource to tune into, and we'll give updates too if there's research updates or spread updates as well. If you're not in Rhode Island and you're looking, want some helpful resources, or you don't know who to contact, I suggest that you check your local extension or environmental management offices for what to do in your state. If you suspect you have spotted lanternfly, or if you know you have spotted lanternfly and you don't know how to manage it, try to contact those offices. I've mentioned the Penn State website. I'm going to mention it again. Here's their general SLF web page. Here's the home page. That's the URL. That's a great page. There's just so much information there: identity, how to identify, how to manage. There's a question and answer, or like a fact page. There's a lot there. They host webinars. They have video series. They do a lot. So it's a really, really great resource. Also, New York State IPM, like I said, they don't have an infestation of spotted lanternfly, but they're very, very active in trying to prevent that. So they've been doing a lot of outreach. Their page, which is that URL here, has, again, a lot of information that you can look at. And also, they are the ones that are creating that map I showed you at the beginning of this presentation and are updating it constantly with new reports. And if you're not sure where to go, email myself or Cindy Kwolek. Like I said, we will direct you where to go, or I can try to answer your question myself. Just, let us know if you need anything. And with that, I wanted to say thank you and for trying to help us stop the spread of spotted lanternfly. This is a cooperative effort with URI and DEM, like I mentioned. So that's myself, Alana Russell, my supervisor, Lisa Tewksbury. We are the URI Biocontrol Lab. Here's our emails here. Also, Cindy Kwolek, the CAPS coordinator for Rhode Island. She's in the Division of Agriculture with the state. Here's her email here. And also Howie Cook, he's with Division of Agriculture as well. He's the pesticide supervisor for Rhode Island. So if you have Rhode Island specific pesticide questions, contact him, please, and he can answer anything for you. With that, I think we have a little bit of time for questions. And
thank you, Alana. Excellent. Yeah, good update. I was wondering if anybody has any questions, you can put your questions into the Q&A box, or the chat box, which I will pull up shortly. It looks like we're getting questions in there as well. And you access that by kind of moving your mouse around the bottom, and you'll see the little buttons pop up. One of them is a chat box. It looks like a little speech bubble, and one's a question and answer, which looks like a question mark. I was interested to learn about the term biopesticide is new for me. So can you explain what that is?
Yeah. So a biopesticide, I guess, is kind of an unconventional pesticide. I wouldn't call it a chemical. It's oftentimes, you may be familiar with BT or Bacillus thuringiensis. So it's oftentimes a pathogen, like a fungus that can be applied like a pesticide, so like a spray, to control insects, since there is a really close coevolution of pathogens attacking insects and feeding off of insects. Yeah, so I guess biopesticide is sort of a eco-friendly kind of pesticide application that's usually a pathogen like a fungus.
Thank you. Any other questions from anybody? Don't see any in the chat. I do see some thank yous and see one comment.
Thank you. And again, I have that email up there. If something comes up later, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. So why don't we do you have those ending slides, and we can kind of wrap up, and then if people have questions, they can always email us. Okay, we just wanted to mention that the application process for becoming a master gardener, if you're interested in learning more about gardening and helping your communities grow, it's open. The application process is an online process. It will be open from now until November 1st. And we will hold a training, whether it's online, whether it's in person, or a hybrid method, we do not know. And that's held in the spring semester, January to April of next year. We will be adding a Providence in-person location if we are in person as well. We wanted to mention that we have a number of gardening resources on our Master Gardener page. If folks have gardening questions throughout the growing season, send an email over to gardener@uri.edu, and we have our hotline volunteers answering emails from home this year. We also invite you to join us at our next webinar series. They're held every Tuesday at 7 p.m. and every Friday at noon. Again, they're all listed on our YouTube page, URI Cooperative Extension YouTube, if you'd like to watch a recording of a past workshop. And any general questions, there's our contact information. Thanks to everybody for joining us. If you don't have any remaining questions, we will look forward to seeing you at the next presentation.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Awesome. Thanks, Alana. Great job.
Thanks, Vanessa, for hosting.